News Radio 700 WLW.
It's kind of push is coming to shove right now as far as working from home goes.
Yes. You hear a lot more companies are cracking down and saying
Big
no
time.
more. And I've said this for a long time.
I know you're totally anti.
And people argue with me. And I'm not anti. I think it can work. All my point is that people think that they work better from home than they actually do. And I think our next guest here is going to give some evidence that may, in fact, be true.
Well, the survey we see here is 1 in 7 remote workers have, we'll talk about it, do a lot of other things besides work on the clock.
A lot of other things.
Here's our good friend Spencer O'Leary. He's a productivity expert, the CEO of Active Ops North America. And Spencer, is this a case of a few bad apples spoiling it for everyone, or is this a pretty common problem?
Even the statistics interesting, isn't it? 1 in 7 it calls. That means 6 in 7 don't.
Right.
So I think we should be careful with some of these statistics. It doesn't surprise me at all that 1 in 7 people are doing things you didn't expect them to do. It was probably not far off 1 in 7 when they worked in the office. So sometimes these things aren't a home or office thing. They're generally around maybe inappropriate management or lack of appropriate management in knowing what your employees are doing.
But in reading in the survey here, I think when a company or especially a boss sees some of the fine print that goes with this, and that is that 1 in 7 employees are logging on just 3 to 4 hours of actual work a day. I think a CEO's heart stops when he hears that, right? He says, "Oh my God, I'm paying you this for a 7-8 hour day, and all of a sudden you're only giving me 3 hours." I have to imagine they're going crazy.
And a lot of them are. The problem we have, the reason that TivOps exist in the world is measuring and then appropriately managing a workforce has never been harder than it is today. It was hard when everybody turned up, and swiped in and out of the office every day, and you could see and hear people and know what they were doing. As the world became more digital, as consumers, we kind of interact with all sorts of organizations now in a digital way. Managing the work got harder because you couldn't see the work anymore. It wasn't paper files on desks. So we've been on this journey well before COVID of the digital environment we work in creates the act of managing humans harder. Then COVID came along, and now managers can't even see the people anymore, never mind the work. They now can see neither. So the act of management got even harder again. So the whole reason we exist is helping people measure and appropriately manage their workforce, regardless of whether they're working from, home or the office or both or somewhere in between. Organizations need to really think about, just because they've equipped the workforce to work from home, they need to make sure they've equipped their management to manage the workforce who's now working from home. That's sort of the next step on this journey.
Spencer, how does management do that? And again, out of sight, not necessarily out of mind. Well, look, we have a sales staff here, a very fine sales staff. Oh, yes. They kick butt every day. But I know for a fact that some of them, maybe they happen to be calling on a client at the mall, and maybe they stop by and check out some clothing at Macy's or whatnot. So, it goes on when you're out of sight. You kind of think, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop and get gas. I'm going to do a little grocery shopping while I'm here at the gas station at the grocery store. So, how do you oversee that without becoming, basically intruding on people's lives?
And that's the hard balance that it's a hard balance that most employers are finding, and it's a hard balance for some employees to work out. If you want me to continue working from home, I've kind of got to give a bit and allow you to see into my work life at home so that you can be comfortable that I'm producing the right level of output. So I encourage any business out there just to think about 2 sets of numbers. And managing remotely really is all about data. If you've got the data to successfully manage remotely, you'll worry a lot less about what people are doing. The 2 sets of data, if you think about inputs and outputs, they're both important. How many hours of work am I getting every day? But just as importantly, how much output am I getting for those hours of work every day? Because just because I pay for someone and can measure the fact that they're sat in front of their computer for 7 hours, if they're not producing the right amount of work in those 7 hours, the problem I've got isn't the 7 hours, it's the output. So focus on both inputs and outputs, and absolutely think about where that line is. We could all install CCTV in our employees' home offices. That's probably crossing the intrusive line, but equally not measuring anything about how many hours people work and how much they do it's probably not good enough. So you got to get that balance right.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's got to come down to kind of rethinking about how to, what are the parameters here? How to, assess if someone is a good worker or a bad worker. And to me, that comes down to employer, businesses or whatever it is becoming results driven, right? Find out how to measure, but then become results driven. And if you can get, your number, here's what you got to hit, whatever that is. And that's the hard part, figuring that out. But if you can hit that, I don't care if you do it in, 10 hours or you do it in 3. I always give this example. I played in the NFL for 8 years, and coaches were 100% results driven. There were guys that watched 30 hours of tape during the week. There were guys that watched no tape. There were guys that went out on a Saturday night, and the coaches knew it. They knew they were out. But guess what? You show up and you ball out on Sunday, they didn't say a damn word. So I feel like you're right. It's so ingrained, and so companies and bosses are so used to seeing, like you said, like how many files you have on your cabinet. That's how you assess performance versus let's figure out what the goal is. What's the goal? What's the number? Assign that number. And if you hit it, I don't care if you do it in 1 day or 5 days.
No, I agree with you. And there's so many good examples out there where, elite sport, and think about that in elite business. And it is outcome, it's output focused. There's still a balance, because if I employ 1,000 people and they're only working 3 hours a day to give me the output I need, why the hell am I employing 1,000 people?
Well, that's the other side of it. Yeah.
If that's creating goods and services in the market that are overpriced to pay for 1,000 people, well, as consumers, we want a more productive world. But I really like your use of the word performance versus productivity, because a lot of businesses out there are just focused on productivity, and that alone can create a really dangerous environment for employees. We're seeing post-COVID and a real drive for people to be more productive working from home, that some other measures of good performance versus productivity, good performance, things around sickness and levels of attrition in a business. There's probably more money lost in business today from having higher levels of sickness and attrition caused by stress in the workplace and poor employee well-being than there is with people goofing off and not being productive enough. So again, good balanced performance of your business is far more important than just good productivity alone.
And it's all about time management. We're talking to Spencer O'Leary. My mother used to work, my mom and dad worked on a production line. Well, their job was my mom, for instance, worked for United Rubber Workers at Inland in Dayton. And they basically just pulled weather stripping for cars, interiors, the rubber stuff. And they would walk down the line, bundled up in their arms, throw it in the bins, because they moved at a certain pace, and that was the pace they expected them to work in. Well, her and the lady she worked with figured out they could walk 50 yards down the thing. They could take a 15-minute break because the rest of it wasn't going to get to them for a while. So they pour a cup of coffee. So it's just time management on both people's parts, don't you think?
I do, and the world, even with those comparisons, the world hasn't changed that much. That production line today might be digital rather than sort of analog or manual, but it's still a production line. I work with a lot of financial services, banks, insurance, and big healthcare companies, and they often talk to me about, every piece of work's different, and it's not like production line management anymore. It absolutely is. The world hasn't changed that much. And I still use the phrase of team time management. That's still probably at the heart of every manager who's listening to this today. If you haven't got good team time management, then that's the start of the problem.
Yeah. Spencer O'Leary, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
Good to speak to you.